to the Think Generational Wealth podcast, and this is episode number 114. I am your host, Amir Estimo. Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast episode. As also, I would like to say, welcome everyone who's listening to this podcast to 2024. I know it's been a while since I recorded a podcast. Looks like since back in October, or published a podcast back in October of 2023. So it's been about close to 3 months since you guys have heard from me. And first of all, I sincerely like to apologize. I know it's when you're doing a podcast episode, one of the things I know I've always been told is that you always want to stay consistent, when it comes to your podcast. Because the minute you stop recording for, let's say you go on a long hiatus, you lose that audience. So if there's anyone today that's listening to this podcast who's always enjoying my content and who look for, where I drop this podcast episode and you're still around, I really do appreciate it. But again, I apologize again. It was just a lot of things going on between I don't know if you guys have shared this in recent podcasts. I have a land flipping business and also I just started a agency business. So basically looking for talent, placing them in the field of engineering. So that's that, and basically the holidays and just being burnt out from everything, just needed a break. And also too I felt like I reached a point when it came to the podcast, I was almost running out of ideas or topics to discuss. Because for a while I've been thinking about the podcast episode basically going I wouldn't say another direction, but adding a little bit more stuff to the podcast. Because we all know this is the personal finance. Generally, I talk about personal finance to that nature. But I feel like I wanted to get into a niche of talking about land investing or starting your own business or something to that nature. And also share the struggles and the wins of being a business owner. So, and obviously start bringing more guests onto the podcast. And for a while, it was just, I had all these ideas in my head, but I just couldn't execute. So that's why today's podcast episode is going to be about the year of consistency. So 2024, I always have a theme. Last year's theme was growth. This year's theme for me is consistency. And the reason I chose this topic is because for me, when it comes to the podcast, it is something I have struggled with when it comes to consistency. And that could be anything in life you do. And I wanted to actually talk about consistency, but also talk about a case study. So I always said, when I buy and flip my first property, I'm going to come in the podcast and do a case study. Now, I'm going to do a visualization of it, and I'm probably going to release that episode sometime next week. I have also focused on growing my own YouTube channel. So I'm probably this year simplify and consistent, meaning I'm not going to focus on too many social media platforms. I'm just going to focus on a few things. YouTube, my content being on YouTube, maybe one other social media platform, and then my podcast. But I'm not going to do too much. We're going to start promoting the podcast a little bit more, getting more guests involved to that nature. That's my goal, okay? So here we go. So the theme of the podcast is consistency, but I also want to share a case study of what consistency is and how in life, if you're not consistent, you don't see results. But if you are, for some odd reason, I don't know if it's just how the universe works, or God, or something to that nature. It always ends up working out the more consistent you are. Okay. So if you look at some of these businesses or people who became wealthy, is because of consistent, massive action. Taking consistent, massive action every single day, or consistent action. So if you're consistent, you will see results. Now, just to show you, I bought a 7.45 acre property, vacant land property out in North Carolina. And these are one of the few places I generally buy properties in: North Carolina, Florida. I'm starting it in Texas, Arizona. But I bought my first property back in May of 2023. I actually had this property under contract for almost a year, for actually a year. And let me tell you, the reason I ended up buying this property was because, for me, I want to be a man of my word. And that's why I'm talking about consistency, especially when it comes to a podcast. And I feel if I want to purchase something for somebody and I'm actually genuinely interested in purchasing it, then I should close. And this property was, I can say, it was a challenge. And the reason I said it was a challenge, because it was 7.45 acres of property. Now, here's the thing when it comes to land. If you probably hear some guru, or if you hear any type of land content, will not tell you. If you buy a 7.45 acre property, it's not always the case that it's 7.45 that is usable. Meaning with this property, it was steep. So where this property was located in North Carolina, in this area, it's steep. So most of the properties there, meaning that there is a slope. So if you wanted to build on this property, you would have to, in a sense, you would have to pay, basically grind it out, level it out, and you have to even know if you can even build on that property. You got to make sure the property, it's not in wetlands, it's not landlocked, meaning that you can get access to property. Wetlands, meaning that the property, let's say there's, it's near a river, or let's say there's some type of flooding activity that's constantly going in that area. If it floods your property, sometimes it's hard to build on it. And not to say you can't sell it or you can't build, it's just going to be expensive. So you want to always keep that in mind when you're buying properties. So, when it came to this property, I would say, because of the steepness, the slope, it was really difficult to be able to sell this property. And then the other issue that was with the property was, and I don't know if that was really an issue, but majority of the people in the beginning kind of made it an issue. And in front of the property, there was a creek. So you couldn't directly access. Now, granted, the property did have frontage access, meaning it was accessible through a road, but because of the creek, you would have had to build a small bridge over it to get to the property, to access it. So that was one of the downfalls of the property. The creek, that was one of the downfalls of the property. So I got this property under contract in May of 2022. So I marketed. A few things I would say I did wrong at the beginning, and I had a problem was, you can actually, when you buy a property, you can list it on the MLS, and you don't actually have to go through a realtor. And you can use a realtor, company like Brokerlist, that will actually list the property for you. Okay, so you don't have to pay a realtor or get out, and then they will post the property on the MLS for you. The beginning, I was getting a lot of drawbacks from this property. First of all, I had listed the property for, so I listed the property in the beginning. I think it was either 51 or 49, something to this nature. When I tell you, I bought this property for, I bought it for 19.2. So 19.2. Okay. Now, I bought the property for that price, and that was a year later. But for me, it was because I had the property under contract so long, and I had a feeling that if I can find the right buyer, I can sell this property. But through kind of not being consistent marketing, put it on broker lists, getting calls, etc., I was not getting, I was getting feedback, which led me to believe, say, okay, well, the property can sell, but the issue is maybe the feedback that I'm getting is what? So what I did was I hired an aerial company, went out and took pictures of the property, posted it, but like again, I was never consistent. So fast forward, May of 2023 comes, I still haven't found a buyer. Generally, with land flipping, there's several ways you have to know your exit strategy. You can do what they call owner financing. So you can actually buy the property yourself and finance it to an end buyer. And they just pay you a monthly payment every single month. Now the drawback behind that is if the person, you miss a payment for a month or two, now you have to basically foreclose on the property. You can foreclose, take your property back, and that's the drawback. So you have to have your system has to be robust enough to where you can even trust the end buyer. So if you know the end buyer knows, hey, every single month I gotta pay, and you can negotiate the terms and all that stuff. That's an exit strategy. The next is assignment of contract, meaning you can assign the contract to an end buyer who come in your place and they will be the one actually closing. So you're just assigning them the contract that you have, the purchase agreement that you have with the seller. So you may charge them, say, hey, $5,000 here, you can step in my place, and then they're the ones who would actually close on the property. The other option is what they call double close, or you take the property down. In the land business, we use this terminology called take the property down, meaning you close the property with your own funds and you sell it to an end buyer. So what the double close is, I don't want to confuse people too much, but just to keep it kind of simple, basically you would buy the property from the seller, and then basically the same day you would sell the property to the end buyer. So all this happens simultaneously, all in one day. You buy the property from the seller, then you close the property with the end buyer. So it's A to B, B to C, if that makes sense. So those are kind of the three exit strategies. I'm pretty sure there's more. I don't know of too many other ones if there is, but that's my experience. So with that, when I bought the property a year later, I said, you know what? I wanted to basically build a brand. And I wanted to be a company where if we say we're going to do something, we do it. Because folks, you don't want to get these properties under contract and then all suddenly, or agreement, and then all suddenly you're not closing. You don't want to be known in the industry, someone who buys properties and can't close, or gets the properties, list them, etc. So I listed the property. When I bought the property, I listed it for 51. I got no buyers. I listed it, I think 48, nothing. I would get people hitting me up here and there, nothing. And then I had to, as time went on, I had to decrease the price. And I ended up getting a all cash offer for the property for $31,000. So I ended up profiting from this property about 10, 11, I'd say 10, because you got to include the closing costs that you already paid when you bought the property. And then some of the closing costs I had to pay because I didn't actually use I didn't use my title company, which I learned in the future. If it's my property, if it's something I directly bought, the transaction will happen at my title company. So, in regards, from May of 2023, I would say to about November, constantly marketing the property. I posted this property on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, constantly renewing my listing, listed it on the MLS by using a flat fee broker, and just constantly marketing. I told myself I gave it because I ended up actually I bought it in May, but I didn't actually started remarketing the property in July. Now you say, Amir, why did you do that? Well, the reason I did that was because you have to remember I already listed this property before, and I got traction, but I didn't get any buyers. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to give the property a basically a break and from the eyes. So when I did repost the property with a new price, there's a fresh set of eyes on this property. So that was my thought process behind it. So I would say from July of 2023 up until I ended up finding a buyer at the end of November, this was a 4 month process. But it was a year in process from May 22 to November. Now, is this always the case? No. With land, this is not always the case. Again, you have to keep in mind when your property has issues. Now, all land sells. I hear that all the time. I'm now a firm believer of that. But you have to understand that when your property doesn't have, let's say it's not really desirable, meaning if you would, let's say your property has access, it's beautiful, it's cleared, it's going to kind of take a while. And depending on where you bought the property, it's going to take a while to sell. Now, if you bought it in a hot market, your property may sell a month or two, couple of weeks. If you have a strong buyers list that you work with, people who's constantly buying from you, your property may even sell even faster. But in this case, where I bought the property, there wasn't much transactions at that moment, but I felt like, you know what, I can hold this property for a few months. Worst case scenario, I can make 100% return. So I got it down to 40, nothing, 41, nothing, 40, nothing. I ended up selling the property, like I said, for $31,000. So I made close to $11,000 profit on the property. And the reason I say that is because what I realized was two things: consistent action and my vision. And the reason I say vision is because I had actually drew a check and I posted this check on my desk. And I wrote a $30,000 in there to my company, etc. Did you know when when they sent that check to me, I looked at it and I said, man, even though it was, it was not quite 30,000, but it made me realize when you visualize something and you put action towards it, it will come true. Many people gives up, and I could have gave up between the money and time I spent. And I would say, if I was to say how much hours I put into this property, and one thing you want to realize, any money you make, whether it's land flipping or whatever, real estate, you want to look at the amount of time it took you, how much time you put. Because when you go work a 9 to 5, let's say you get paid hourly, you get paid $14 an hour. So for every time, let's say you work on this hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, $14 an hour. And I would say, was the time worth it? I would say yes, because I was able to experience a transaction. Now, I only did 2 real estate transactions last year, but from buying and selling. So you know what, I was not a firm believer of it, but now I am, because of the fact that I would say because of the fact that I was able to experience something from start to finish. But the action and the vision was the key. The constant action, marketing, talking to buyers, talking to realtors, constantly. It was every single day. And then I knew I was getting close. How close? I don't know. If you ever read the book 3 Feet from Gold, this was a book Napoleon Hill, I think Sharon Lecter wrote it, or she's part of Napoleon Hill's foundation. And one thing it says is in the book, most people get to 3 feet, they get close to the gold and they quit. And one thing about me is I never looked at myself as a quitter. Some would say, you know what, I would have quit a long time ago. But to me, I wanted to go through, first of all, I wanted to go through the process. Because how can you share any type of knowledge with someone if you didn't even go through the process? And when you get that close, why quit? Well, can it get expensive? Yes, between the marketing, sending mailers, etc. Yes, it can get expensive. But what you want to keep in mind is, instead of just quitting, maybe try some other techniques. Maybe say, instead of sending mailers, maybe what I can do is just, hey, maybe it's a situation where you may have to handwrite letters and send it off. Anything to keep this alive, because the reason is the reward. This will show your effort. And that was my mindset. So after this happened, and again, I visualized it, I told myself, vision and consistency are 2 things that work hand in hand. When you have a vision and you put massive action behind it, it will work. It will always work. So for 2023, folks, consistent. Whatever you decide, don't go set a goal. For example, when the new year happened and people wants to set these health goals, going to the gym. If you are not doing that 22, 21, and 20, what's going to be a difference in 24? The difference has to be in your habits. It has to be in your action. Because if you want to lose weight and you're constantly eating chips, you're eating out late, spending a lot of money, etc., it's going to be the same thing as the previous year. So for me, I always look at this in a sense of consistent action. Consistent action. That's where I want to do with the podcast. Instead of me taking these long hiatus, consistent action. Maybe I need to make some adjustments. Instead of missing a week, I had a plan with the podcast. I said, I'm going to record 2 to 3 episodes ahead of time. And I didn't do it. So guess what? When it came time to record a podcast, don't worry about it. And I love podcasting. I do. So I just wanted to share this with you guys and make 2024 consistent. Don't be starting something and not finishing. Be consistent year round. Be consistent. Massive daily action. Take action. Write down your goals. Where can you be consistent? Make it tangible. Don't say I don't make $1 million this year and you even never made 100. So you're that far removed from $1 million. Maybe if you made 700,000 last year and you can be closer to 1 million. But if you never made that, how can you even go make $1 million? That's not feasible. That's not attainable. Your goals have to be realistic and it has to be attainable. That's why this year should be the year of consistency. Because as we look at next year, we are now in 2025. We are now half decade in. Who would have ever thought that, folks? I lost I wouldn't say lost, but it was about, and I'll end on this note. And most recently, I connected with a previous college, someone I knew in college. We were not friends. We were cool. We hung out, but we knew each other. We knew of each other. Great guy. He ended up starting his own leadership academy, called the Albert Gibbs Leadership Academy. He started back home, went back home to Fort Lauderdale, was a pillar in the community. I most recently, last couple of days ago, I found out he passed away. And the funny thing was, me and him hasn't talked since college. But what happened was, I used to post my land that I'm selling. I have a couple of other lands right now I'm still trying to sell. And he actually saw one of my listings. And he's like, hey, Amir, is this your property? And I said, and then we exchanged numbers. We actually ended up talking for 30 minutes, making plans, he's talking about how he's going to, he travels in the city I live pretty often. But he said, hey, Amir, the next time I see you, next time I come in the city, I'm going to call you. We can come and hang out, meet your family, etc. And I was like, cool, it's awesome, man. And that was probably about October, November, beginning November, somewhere around there. And then I found out literally before the year is over, he passed away. Young guy, about my age range. And it really resonated with me. And it made me realize how short life is. Here today, gone tomorrow. You can never get used to death. And you can never say you have enough time, because you don't. Tomorrow's not promised, folks. So if you have any dreams you would like to accomplish, go for it. Don't wait. And to me, to see that he passed away at such a young age and he left a legacy behind, this is what it's about. Generational wealth, legacy. This show is about legacy. So that really, I would say, bothered me for the last few days, because I just talked to him, like I said, a couple of months before that. And we were making plans, to the point he was like, hey, just, anytime you get any properties, I'm trying to buy a property for my dad, shoot it to me. We can do business together. And we didn't even have that opportunity. It always makes you realize how close you are to death. And if you are, how you need to achieve your dreams. Because you don't know when that time comes, and you don't know how it will happen. But don't let your dreams stop just because of fear, just because of what people are saying. And I share this with you, this case study with you, because I always told you guys, anything is possible. So for me, it was possible to buy and flip my own property. I knew I could do it. It just would have took time. Right now, launching an agency business, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take time. It's competitive. There's a lot of people who's doing it, but that's fine. A pie can be unless, I don't know, not everybody, but if I bake a pie and I put it out and I put it for everyone, I myself can't eat a pie by myself. I know for me, I can't. But if everyone takes a piece of the pie, then that means we all can eat. And that's what it is. Just because you have a lot of competition don't mean you can't eat. Don't mean somebody's going to give you a chance. And I kept telling myself, all I just need is a chance. And I had a chance. I kept telling myself, I just need to find the right buyer. And I ended up finding the right buyer. Don't quit. Keep going. Consistency. And I'll leave you with that. I appreciate you for listening to this podcast episode, because I know you could be doing anything in this world. But the fact that you're listening to this podcast episode is much appreciated. Appreciate you guys, and be on the lookout. The podcast will resume again every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. Every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. Appreciate you guys. Till next week. Much love.